everyone, and welcome back to Crafter's Grove. Today I'm going to teach you how to make an ants on a log wall decoration. To get started on this project, you're going to need to find a large tree branch. To make sure you're not damaging any ecosystems, please pick a branch that's already fallen off the tree from either your property or from a public park where the branches are going to be cleaned up and turned into yard waste compost anyways and not being taken from the natural ecosystem there. Once you have your branch, you're going to want to affix it to a base so that it can stay upright like this to allow you to clean it off and then coat it with polyurethane. Here you can see the bottom of the base, and I attached the stick to the base using a screw, but I think a nail would have been a more gentler approach and would have avoided some of the cracking I observed in the log. Having the branch mounted like this allows for the polyurethane to dry and cure without having the stick sticking to other surfaces. The purpose of applying some polyurethane to your stick, though not necessary, would include protecting the lichen and the stick, protecting your home from species that might be living in the stick that you weren't aware of, and just ensuring that this stick and project is going to last for many years to come. As always, when working with polyurethane, you want to apply a thin coat and making sure to remove any buildup and then letting it dry and cure before moving on with the project. So here's the log cured after applying 2 coats of a satin polyurethane finish. Once the stick is all prepped, we can move on to sculpting the ants with polymer clay. So I'm using a black clay here. It is a firmer clay that's more designed for retaining the little details from sculpting, but really I just wanted a large block of black clay for this project, so that's why I bought it. I did find that this was a lot harder to work with. It required a lot more work for my joints to soften up the clay. But once it's softened, you want to create 3 balls of black clay, 2 being slightly larger and 1 being smaller. And then to figure out what size you want to use, you might want to match it up with the wire you intend to use, as well as the size of your stick. So I've cut a small piece of wire, and now I'm bending it using 2 small crafting pliers to bend it into the shape of the leg, so I can get a sense of whether this is the right size of ball that I want to use for the ants. Once you're happy with the size of your balls for your ants, you need to start shaping them. So the back one needs to be pinched a little bit at one end just to form that narrowing that looks like an ant's backside. And then you want to do a similar thing with the head. So the front is going to be a little bit more narrow by pinching it and then rounding that narrow bit and leaving the back a little bit more rounded. Next, you'll want to firmly attach all pieces by skewering them with a piece of wire. This does distort them a little bit depending on where you're putting the pressure, so just be mindful of that. I do find this is a necessary step. Although polymer clay will stick to itself, it's not the best bond that there is, so if you really want to make sure they stick together and you don't have to glue the pieces, putting some wire in between them will ensure that bond between the pieces and also allow you to shape them as well. Next, you want to cut some wire to use as the legs of the ants. So I got pieces of wire for the legs that were about 1 3/4 centimeters in length, and that's for an ant that's about just over 4 centimeters in length. So before moving on, I just wanted to make sure that it actually was the right size that I wanted for the ant. Seeing that it looks about the right size, I use that piece of wire as a template to cut the remaining 5 legs for the ant. After that, I cut 2 smaller pieces about 1 centimeter each for the little antennae of the ant. Next, you want to bend the legs at about a 45-degree angle, 2/3 down the wire, and then stick the other end of the wire into the body of the ant. All 6 legs I did stick into the middle part of the ant, but I did find that the last 2 legs needed to be a bit longer, so I cut some slightly longer pieces to form those legs. After the legs were all in, I did find the head a little bit large, so I did make a slightly smaller head, and I found that to be a lot more fitting for the ant. The last thing that's left is to bend and insert the little antennae into near the back third of the ant's head. I made a second ant using the same method as the first one, and then for the third ant I stopped after making the balls because it's time to make a little bit of an addition, which is a leaf that I want the ant to be carrying. So I was mixing a bunch of greens together to form a more natural green that matched some of the lichen that's already on the stick. Once you have the basic form of your leaf, you're going to want to cut a piece of wire that's going to be long enough both to stick through the leaf and through the entire body of the ant. This is going to secure the leaf to the mouth of the ant. So because I wanted the leaf to have a little bit of a curved feel to it, to give that sense of the ant dragging the leaf, I made sure that the wire also had that curve, and that helped ensure the overall shape of the leaf. Before attaching the leaf to the ant, make sure you put any little etching that you want to do into the leaf to make it more realistic. And I did this using a toothpick, as you see here, and then alternated between scraping and etching out little spots in the leaf, smoothing over with my finger, and using the side of the toothpick to push and form mounds. These mounds mimic the raised veins that you can often see on the backs of leaves. Once you're happy with the overall shape of your leaf, you can begin skewering the other pieces of the ant onto the wire, making sure to push them all the way to the base of the leaf to give that impression that the ant is carrying the leaf in its mouth. Okay, once you're happy with your 3 ants, it's time to stick them on some parchment paper and bake them in the oven. Just before you do, make sure you adjust those legs as much as needed, as once it's all baked, it will all be secure into one piece. Next, you're going to secure the picture hook on the back of the stick. You can do this by finding the center weight of the stick so it lies balanced on the wall, by balancing it on your finger and finding where your finger needs to be until it no longer tilts off your finger. You can mark that with a pencil, and then that's where you want to place the picture hook. Make sure the tiny multiple hooks are pointing downwards. Then you can use a hammer and needle nose pliers to hold the tiny nails and hammer them into the stick. Next, you want to secure the log, maybe using a rag as I've done here, to make sure that the top part of the log where you want to glue your ants is always facing up and the log won't roll. Next, you're going to place your ants to figure out where you want them to be before you start gluing them down with the epoxy. Next, you want to protect your working surface before using the epoxy. Get a little card to mix the epoxy on, and then some sticks to both mix and apply the epoxy. If any of the legs of the ants or the antennae have fallen off, just set them aside, and once you have the epoxy, dip them in the epoxy and then insert them back into their original holes. Next, use the epoxy to glue the very bottom of the ant, the parts which are going to be touching the stick, and then place it on the stick and making sure to secure it very strongly to allow the epoxy to cure the 2 pieces together. So I allowed the ant to cure following the directions of the epoxy, only doing one because I did want to do a little bit of a test. What you can see is it's not really secure. It was quite wobbly and actually came off altogether. I believe that's because of the Scotch tape I used. It didn't really help to secure the ant to the wood, so we'll have to re-glue that. But in the meantime, I wanted to fill the hole from the screw and the crack that had formed using some wood glue. With the wet wood glue in place, I mixed up some more epoxy and then proceeded to glue the other 2 ants and re-glue the first ant that I had done. This time I secured the ants to the log using some painter's tape, wrapping it around really firmly, and this tape worked much better than the Scotch tape. Once the epoxy is cured, it's time to remove the painter's tape and check to make sure that the ants are secure onto the log. So with the ants secure and the holes filled with wood glue, it's time to use the polyurethane just to seal up the last end of the stick. That's the base where it was connecting to the wider base to hold the stick upright. So I did another 2 coats on this end of the stick to match the rest. I let it cure, and then it was time to hang up on the wall. I really love this piece because it brings a bit of nature and whimsy into the indoors. Now, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as well and are able to make some ants on a log of your own. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you want to see more of our videos, and make sure to tick off that bell by the subscribe button so that you're always notified when we post a new video. Bye!